Hello everyone, Jane Ladio, U.S. Bank National Sales Executive, past Tempo Chair and current board member. Our 15th anniversary of the leadership session. So excited to be part of this. Honored to support Tempo's momentous event today. It's really a terrific opportunity for us to respond to this notion that leaders must rise right now as America faces crossroads. And at the very heart of the crossroads are women, strong, powerful women like all of you out there today. So what we really want to do is have this mission, this tribe that we establish that agrees to engage in financial planning along with professionals to help you think about how you can feel more confident about your future. Now, financial planning is about as fun for most of you as going to the doctor or dentist for a root canal. I get it. But this is one of those things that Gunjan Kedia, our guest speaker, and I talk about all the time, where it just should not be optional. And that's how we want you to think about it. It is not optional. You must have an advisor that you work with, as well as a really great plan to guide your decisions. And by doing that, you're going to be in a much better place. So our featured presenter today, I'm very proud to announce our Vice Chair of U.S. Bank Wealth Management and Investment Services, Ms. Gunjan Kedia. Gunjan is the consummate professional who is very frank when it comes to this topic. She is highly regarded as a former EVP of State Street Bank and Trust, head of global product for New York Bank of Mellon, McKinsey & Company partner for financial institutions, MBA from Carnegie Mellon University, Tepper School of Business, and Rockstar Delhi College of Engineering graduate, who enjoys giving back to her community and all of you tremendously. National Junior Achievement, American Red Cross Board Service, goes on and on. As our most powerful women in finance, certainly she has been celebrated and has great insights to share with us. So with that, we will pursue having Jen, our Tempo CEO, engage in a question and answer session with Gunjan as well. We hope you take advantage of this session and the opportunity to engage in a no-cost planning invitation with us post-session that will truly improve your life. As Charlie Peacock once said, the full glory of the hokey pokey is to put your whole self in. So let's do this. And with that, I want to thank you and welcome you, Gunjan, and it's over to you.
It's my real pleasure to join you today to talk about an important set of topics during this 15th Tempo Milwaukee event. We at US Bank are very proud to be the anniversary sponsor of this wonderful organization and to help support your mission to further the impact of women in your communities. And to all of you who have made it a priority to tune in today and join us for this conversation, thank you, and I am looking forward to it. My name is Gunjan Kedia, and I'm the Vice Chairman of Wealth Management and Investment Services at US Bank. I want to give you a little history of how we came to ask questions about women and their wealth. It was 4 years back, a group of practitioners in the industry asked ourselves if we could be more delightful and impactful, especially for our women clients. And from that came a series of listening tours across 10 cities, 400 women over lunches and breakfasts, and a candid and frank set of advice and guidance for what we could be doing differently. We followed up with quantitative research. We wanted to make sure that we were capturing the perspectives, not just of the women we talked to, but for society in general. But before we share the results of what we found and what we're doing about it, and a personal discussion with each of you on what you could be doing about it, let's just take a minute to celebrate how far women have come. 2020 is a momentous year. It's the 100th year of women getting the right to vote in a year when the election has been very front and center in so many people's minds, and reminds you of how far we have come and how far the influence of women have come. So in no way do I want to forget about the progress that we have to celebrate together. And there is more that we can do. Let's just think for a minute about the anatomy of influence and how people come to influence big decisions, not just in their personal life, but in society in general. There are 3 things that I could point to. The first is just voice. When women started The women's movement is often traced back to Seneca Falls, when the first set of women, with no rights, no positional authority, but a voice, asked to have equal rights. And from there started a journey of so many instances of enormous success that women have achieved simply by organizing their voices together. My favorite story in this journey is really the Mothers Against Drunk Driving. What did they have? They didn't have positions, they didn't have a different law, but they raised awareness of a very important topic. And as a result, young kids dying of drunk driving has plummeted in our society. So the voice has been for a long time a really significant way women have influenced outcomes, and we have done it very, very well. You can trace it back to the Million Women March or #MeToo. There's so many other examples of our voice mattering. With time came positional authority and a series of firsts. The first woman on the Supreme Court, the first woman senator, the first woman CEO of a company. And with those positional authorities came the ability to impact decisions and make a difference when it mattered the most. Our laws changed as a result. Our policies have changed as a result. It was not common for women to be able to breastfeed at work. Mothers' rooms were not a phenomenon you saw in executive floors in the past. But these things are fairly commonplace and widespread today because there were women in positions of authority who raised awareness of these topics and made it happen. The third lever for influence is really money. There we find women have not done as much as they can. And that's the conversation we are having today. Let's just take a minute to talk about how much money we are actually talking about. It is a lot. There's a lot of numbers on the page that you are looking at. Let's just focus on a few. 20+ trillion in household budgeting is money that is influenced by a woman's decision, and it has changed industries after industries. More than 20 trillion in personal wealth is managed primarily by a woman today. And this is personal wealth where the woman is a primary decision maker. So we are talking about a very influential set of numbers. The question I will pose to you today is, are women using this astounding amount of influence over trillions of dollars to create the impact they would like to see happen? Despite all the conversation we've had about women and the wealth gap and the significant dollars at stake, why do women under-engage in their finances? So our research gave us some clues. We interviewed 3,000 respondents, half men, half women, across multiple generations. And we found across the board, women simply do not enjoy engaging with money matters. We gave them a choice of words to use, and as you can see, women disproportionately chose words that were negative: fear, anxiety, boredom. And that's one of the reasons they do not engage. Again, when we ask them, do you talk to friends about money? Do you use a financial app? Do you watch podcasts about money? Do you hire a financial advisor? In each case, we saw this thing that we are beginning to call the engagement gap. What I'd like to say to you today is, I'm not going to try and convince you that you should have fun managing your money. I just want to convince you that it is not optional. The impact to women over the course of a lifetime when they do not engage in their money can be devastating. And more women do not have an option. In 2013, something very important happened in our society. There were more women of marriageable age that were not married than married. We are still seeing 1 and 2 marriages end in divorce, and women live about 5 years longer than men. So whether it is by choice or death or divorce, women will end up managing their money. And then the sooner we learn to do it effectively and early on, the better the outcomes will be over time. Our research confirms that the confidence gap between men and women and how confident they feel about managing their financial affairs is very real. It doesn't have to be. Women make good decisions, but we are seeing a vicious cycle here. You don't enjoy it, you don't engage in it, you are less confident in it. And I will tell you personally, there is no feeling better than feeling like you're on top of your money affairs. Even if you don't like the answers, just knowing that you know what's going on with your money affairs is just a wonderful place to get to. So, we in the industry started to think about what we could do to truly be responsive to a different kind of a customer base, a different type of a client, and perhaps asking ourselves if we could engage differently, provide our services in a different way. I personally love watching ads, especially for big consumer brands, because it gives you a real window into what they are seeing as things shifting in the industry. One of my favorites is Tide. It's one of the widest held consumer products in American households. And look at how much they have changed. From a consumer who was worried about her husband's shirts being very wide to the strong, powerful woman, and now the reality of the way our households work, really reflecting a new woman, a new society. I've also reflected on the impact of the statue called the Fearless Girl on our industry and asked ourselves the question of, are we doing enough to change the way our industry is positioned, the way our offices look, who our advisors are, how the language of money and investments and what it achieves is talked about to reflect the goals and dreams and aspirations of women. And all of these have served to form our agenda for making a difference, with the goal really of helping you and every other woman you might know engage productively with your money affairs early enough in a confident manner so that your outcomes are healthy and solid and you can build your wealth. It was a pleasure to talk to you about some of our findings. I'll leave you in closing with 3 questions to ask yourself. Do you feel good about where you stand with your money affairs? Do you have someone you can talk to about this to get started on this journey? And most importantly, as you close out this session, do you feel motivated enough to try? Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you, Gunjan, and thank you, US Bank, for serving as our anniversary sponsor of our 15th annual leadership event featuring actress, activist, and author Gabrielle Union. The theme of our event is equity and empowerment, both elements of which you focused on in your presentation. So there was so much rich content and key learnings from your presentation. It was hard to narrow it down, but I'm going to toss a couple of questions to you, Gunjan, and based on what we heard. So this year, Temple Milwaukee celebrates 45 years as an organization. So truly a really incredible milestone. But if you think back to 1975 and you think of the landscape for women executives, it was vastly different than it is today. At that time, our founding women developed a vision of a society where women would hold an equal place in leadership, in policy, and decision making. And while we know and we've seen the research that women have evolved, we know we still have much work to do, including when it comes to women and money. So, why is that?
Jen, first of all, congratulations on 45 years. That's quite an accomplishment. And let me just take a minute to thank you for your service to Tempo and for letting us share some of our thoughts. It's truly a pleasure. And as you know, Milwaukee is a very big, very strategic market for US Bank. So truly, thank you for including us.
Thank you.
You ask a very, very important question on why is it. And I have, in the course of doing research on women and wealth, studied and understood a fair amount about the history of the women's movement, if you put it that way. And it is true that we had periods of real growth and real success. And I would say the 60s through the 70s were really extraordinary periods for advancement in women's rights. That's where the Civil Rights Act was passed. Women entered the workforce in big ways. And they learned to control their pregnancies, which really did give them the freedom to pursue careers that they wanted. More recently, I have noticed this phenomenon that we have started calling the tyranny of the 25%. Every institution you look at is beginning to boast 25% of the leadership group is women, 25% of the board of directors is women, 21% of the Congress is women. But we seem to have maxed out on sort of that number. So you are right, there is more progress to be made. And the progress will be made not only through fighting for congressional lawmaking, but a cultural expectation of the place women have. And in my mind, the biggest proof point of that was the hashtag #MeToo movement. As you know, there was no law, there was no new law that was passed, but
Right.
women were just culturally ready for a different way to live. And so that, in my mind, gives me a lot of optimism around things to come, a different way women will arrive at the workplace in their own skin rather than in, navy blue suits with white stripes pretending to be men. So that's the new era I look forward to.
Agreed. I look forward to that as well. One of the priorities that we talk about at Temple Milwaukee and through our Women's Leadership Collaborative is this idea about building equity or awareness of equity for women in the workplace. And much of our conversation to date has really focused on pay equity for women. And as you just shared, US Bank takes it even further with your recent survey results that show gender equality has yet to be achieved in terms of financial planning. Can you talk about some of the key highlights of the survey that stood out to you?
Well, as I just shared, that it's very clear that money is the last thing women have started engaging in. So believe it or not, all of the dialogue that we see around income inequality is a very positive sign. It tells me that women are waking up to a very important part of women's rights, which is not just the legal construct in which we operate, but also the financial construct in which we operate. So it's a very good sign. I do think the wealth conversation is broader and it's not just about income. As you know, as we know in the industry we live in, there's a big difference between income and wealth. And what we see being different are a lot of choices you make before you have income. So, I've spoken about wealth gap a lot. One of my biggest surprises sort of coming out of this survey was the confidence gap. And Jen, I have to tell you, I truly personally dislike this concept of a confidence gap. I have read surveys after surveys that say women are less confident in how they manage their money. And there was nothing I would have liked better than to debunk that theory in the facts that we got. And guess what we saw in our survey? Women, time and again, say they are not as confident as men about managing their money. I will tell you the deeper point here is slightly more interesting to me. And it could be just a bias, an overconfidence, underconfidence bias, because in our survey, we also asked a lot of secondary questions. Things like, do you feel you can survive a loss of a job for 3 months? Do you feel confident about paying your bills next month? And in those specific questions, women did better. So, one of the things that I want the audience to reflect on, and for us as women to reflect on, is maybe we're just being quite harsh on ourselves. Men and women may know five questions out of 10 in an exam. Women think they did badly, men think they did fine. But regardless, women do perceive themselves as not being as confident managing money. And that is the wealth gap. And it's something we need to address very specifically.
Wonderful. Yeah. So one of the other points that we heard and that you presented on, and the research shows women have more money and more power now more than ever. But when it comes to these financial planning conversations, women are still less engaged than men. Can you talk a little bit about why you think that is?
Well, the survey showed us that that's a fact, but it was our conversations with women that really paint a picture. And if I could just share some of this with you, which was so interesting. I had a woman tell me that she was the primary breadwinner for their family for a long time. And yet, the financial advisory team that would come to her house, if they had only one set of materials, they would hand it to her husband instead of her. We had another woman tell us that she's the primary breadwinner, but in the tax returns that their advisor fills out, her spouse is always listed as the primary tax filer. We had a lawyer tell us that she was the first partner in a law firm, and a team of investment bankers came around and they shook everybody's hands and then missed hers. We had another woman who was on the proxy as the top 5 earning members of a publicly traded company. And after the proxy came out, all the men would talk about how many advisors would call them, but she never got a call. I could go on and on and on about the experience of women with the industry has not been as welcoming as we can make it. And I believe that's one of the reasons women have underengaged in finances, because it has not felt like fun. And our message here again is it doesn't have to be fun, but it is not optional. So we as an industry need to make it fun. And a lot of that is what we think about. We're using the phrase a delightful experience, something that you really want to undertake with an advisor who feels like a friend, who feels like someone who's not talking at you or down to you, and someone you can share your aspirations, your hopes for what you want your money to accomplish. That is when we will see equal engagement in the financial matters from women.
So that brings up a really good point. I'm hearing it from financial companies in Milwaukee and just within the industry that there is this drive and this large proactive recruiting effort for female financial advisors. Can you talk a little bit, maybe what your advice would be to companies that are looking to add female advisors? Where is their first stop, or where do they even begin that search? And
Yeah.
then, as a female financial advisor, what would be your best piece of advice that you could offer? So, two
Yeah,
questions. Sorry.
yeah, they're the two very good questions. And I will tell you, one of the most surprising things in our survey was that women did not say that they were looking to work with women advisors only. And I still can't fully explain that phenomenon. It could be that women have seen so few women in this industry that they have sort of given up looking for someone who looks like them. In fact, the category that most wanted their financial advisor to look like them was men under 35. So I'm going to let you think about that, because I cannot explain those results at all, but that's what we saw. We are trying very hard to attract women advisors because they're also good for men. I mean, you see different skill sets, and our men are very empathetic too. Very good financial advisor, whether they're male or women, or male or female, as you know, is very good at listening, very good at empathizing and understanding what your client's trying to do. So we are very proud of even our men, because they do this well. But that's half the workforce that we are missing in an industry where we need talent. So we have many programs. Our most successful one has been something we call AAA, and it is assistant to associate to advisor, where we are growing our own advisors. And that is a dynamic, vibrant, diverse class that is representing very different points of views. They're very digitally savvy. They think about money very differently. They tell us that wealth may not be a good word, because the connotations of wealth in so many people's minds are somebody fabulously wealthy who owns an island. And what we always say is, wealth is the first discretionary dollar that you have, that you want to do something with. So we are introducing very different vocabulary, very different mindsets with our AAA program. There are lots of other sources. It's not going to be one answer. It's a portfolio of options, but this AAA program has certainly been something I'm very proud of.
That's wonderful. Great advice. And certainly for those women that are looking to join the financial industry. So, what do you believe women can do now to maybe change the narrative for them and their finances?
Thank you, Jen, because we do need to change the narrative. First, we need to stop women saying they're underconfident in their finances. If I accomplish even that for a small subset of women before I retire from my work, I would think it is very, very good. We can't. The narrative that has been created is women are underconfident. They say they don't understand all of finances. So men have interpreted that by saying, let's talk at women. Let's teach them these jargon-filled words. And one thing that does not work is a complicated jargon-filled narrative of stock markets only. This is money is essentially personal to both men and women. So the narrative has to be this is an essential skill. This is not optional. You control a growing share of the world's wealth, more than 50% today.
Mhm.
You deserve to have an experience that you enjoy. Speak up, make your voice heard, and help us change the industry to be more responsive. That is the narrative that needs to be developed and well understood and articulated over time.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. So let's talk about the last 7, 8 months, this thing that we call the pandemic. We know it has had a devastating impact on our country, on the world, on our economy, but it has also, particularly for working women, really devastated this population, and they have been one of the hardest hit by COVID-19. We often refer to it at Tempo as the motherhood tax, in that women traditionally, even pre-COVID, have been the caregivers. But now, with the pandemic, there is this extra burden on working mothers trying to have it all as an employee, as a caregiver, as a mother, as a teacher. What do you think, what would be your advice to working women, or any solace that you can provide to them?
Jen, it's very, very devastating to women in the workforce. I think when this whole thing finishes and we look at the numbers, we will see a very statistically significant retreat from the workforce by women, by minorities. And it's not just children, not just women needing to make a choice between do I help my kids get on Zoom and study or do I do my work? But it's also aging parents who don't want to be in nursing homes where people feel more responsibility for taking care of vulnerable populations. If there is a silver lining, and I have been trying to look for a silver lining, it is that the professional world has woken up suddenly to an acceptance of flexible work arrangements. And it is my sincere hope that when we come back from the COVID environment, FaceTime, making sure you have to travel to meetings will give way to a realization that executives can be very effective working from home. And that fundamental level of flexibility will probably do more good for women than the short term impact we have. So, what I say to all the women who might be listening to us, and please say this to your friends, if you have a woman who's considering leaving the workplace because of the pressures of the home, consider asking for flexibility instead and maintaining employment and income continuity. Even small things like benefits continuity, 401k continuity makes a big difference to wealth creation in your life. And I know at US Bank, we have come up with so many creative programs to give our employees a way to work and balance. We're allowing people not to work from 8 in the morning to 11 and make up the hours in the evenings and weekends. We are allowing people to change jobs and do jobs that are more conducive to flexible work hours and come back afterwards if that's what you prefer. We are allowing people to take half an hour breaks in the middle of the day to take care of helping kids on Zoom and things like that. So many companies have good intentions. Before you make a life-changing decision, just sit and talk to HR, your manager, and see if you can craft income continuity in some ways, even if it's not as high profile. So that's just sort of my plea to every woman who might be thinking through this, is to just talk through it and see if there are some solutions rather than just leaving the workforce completely.
I agree. Flexibility is key. And I think having those conversations with your employer are really key. I think employees are assessing their policies. We've heard it from a lot of our Tempo Milwaukee members and our emerging women leaders that they are more productive after 5, after 6 when their kids are down, or they put them down for bedtime. And so to have that kind of mindset as an employer, to know that I'm still going to get productivity, but it's just going to be at different hours of the day. So I think that's really key. So thank you. Just a couple more questions if you're okay. All right.
Of course.
So you talked a lot about this in your presentation, but can you talk about some of the qualities that differentiate a woman who is not confident with her money as opposed to a woman who is confident with her money?
Well, I'll tell you, necessity is the mother of all innovation, right? And so what we hear from women who've learned to be confident about their finances were not that they wanted to, but they had to. So we hear a woman who was the third siblings and had two sort of financial brothers. That's how she described it. She's like, I had two financial brothers, and her parents, her father, when he died, left her as the trustee of their estate because there was a sense that she would be fair and thoughtful about the family's needs. And so she learned to manage affairs because that was a burden placed on her by her father. We heard about a Black woman in Denver who runs a third generation construction company. And she told us that because of the way she looked, nobody solicited her with any financial products ever. And because of that, she had to do all her research because there was no one else. And she says, at this point, I can write a book for you. So, what I notice about women who have learned to be confident are women who have not had their husbands manage it. They have not been able to palm off the financial affairs to someone else. And once they get into it, they are damn good at it. I will tell you, this is not a capability gap here. Women have been managing household budgets for such a long time. They intuitively know how to do this. But you have to sort of push them in the deep end, and that's where you see a woman who's confident. The second set is women who are trained in it. One of the high-powered professions that is very present with women is the CFO track, and we do see women who are auditors, who are accountants, who are very comfortable managing their affairs, and in fact will manage it for many other people as well. So that's another category of confidence we see. And then there are women, very small group of women who are sort of very, and I belong in that. I didn't sort of arrive at this profession accidentally, who just sort of at an early age, either through need, understood that money was an important component to get right, to really have control over your life. And they invested in that, much like you invest in healthcare, or much like you invest in running, even if you hate it, because it's good for your health, and it's good for your well-being. So those are what I call the conscientious sorts who just said this was not optional, and I'm going to master it. So we see those categories of women, and I'm sure there are many others, and they set a really good role model for their daughters, for their neighbors, and for all their friends. So one woman who's confident about her finances probably creates 20 women who are confident about their finances.
Sure. You talked a lot about the confidence with women and money, and there's a kind of a statistic or something that's always said about women and their purchasing power. Even I believe they have the majority of the purchasing power within a household typically. But yet, how do women feel differently about money than men do?
It is a very true thing that women have managed budgets. So from a cash flow standpoint, and Jen, as you know, they have massively changed industries after industries. You saw in my presentation my favorite Tide ad, and that's a very good example of a very large company that at one point used to be run, very much by men, realizing that their primary audience was women, and they have executives. So that industry has really taken off. But there are so many other things around purchasing power. You might know that women buy more cars than men because they drive them more. They do household chores. They do a lot of kids driving around. And yet, until a very recent time, all safety crashes, I believe, used a male dummy to test the results of a crash site. And when they had the need to use a female dummy, all it was a smaller male dummy. And I heard this podcast once, and I can't vary these facts, but it has just stayed in with me. And they said, women started to say, we are not a smaller man, we have breasts. So our seat belts need to look different. And it created a whole different mindset for a whole different industry. So women, through their purchasing power, have made a very, very big difference. I do think that somehow the budgeting of the consumer spend, where women have such voices, not yet translated to the savings, investments, wealth creation, the discretionary part, where we do see a lot more kind of male decision making happening, and hence we are having this conversation. Maybe in 10 years, when we come back, it will be a different picture.
Absolutely. Well, I had never heard that analogy, or I'd never heard that example of the test dummy, the crash test dummy. So that's really interesting. And so, I mean, obviously that's so valid. I mean, women are doing a lot of the driving and carpooling and soccer moms and all of that stuff. So that's interesting. So thank you for bringing that up. One final question, and it's kind of along those lines, but you talk a lot about this in your presentation, but the financial industry in itself treats women differently when it comes to money. So can you talk a little bit about why that might be, or what the industry is doing to change those conversations for women?
Well, I'll tell you, I have certainly asked this question of ourselves to say, and I will tell you, I've concluded that the industry actually does not treat women differently. And that may be the problem, is the industry, because it was traditionally by the men for the men, is set up that way. And because we have not been purposeful about saying, are there some experiences we should have different? Um, are there is there a different set of goals that are more important? Maybe that's been the issue. Some of us within US Bank were having a discussion around the impact of the Fearless Girl statue, if you've heard of that. And we wondered why that one statue has created a global sort of emotional response by women to this industry. And in exploring that question, we went to look for some other symbols of our industry, and we were a bit horrified. And for respect of out of respect for various firms, I won't name the firms, but if you do research, you'll see the symbols of investments are not just the raging bull, which is as alpha male a symbol as they get, but derivatives of that are so unpleasant. Like we see these statues of a bull and a bear clawing each other's out with bare teeth. And I don't know about you, but a lot of women don't find that to be an appealing, welcoming environment to work with people. So my sort of growing conclusion here is not that the industry treats women differently, but the fact that industry is not evolving enough to take into account a growing customer base that is different, that prefers to sit in a living room structure, not a dark wood structure, that wants to not talk about just the performance number of their investments, but what's the impact of their wealth. And strangely, we are finding these questions are equally important to the modern man. So this is, maybe not as much of a gender divide, but just evolution of how people have changed their minds around what is important as they grow more affluent and their basic needs are met. The mindset shifts a little bit. So So this is the complexity that we are really sort of grappling with in trying to be an industry. And we are well-meaning, believe me, our men and women advisors care for their clients' well-being in a very deep and personal way. And I believe that's true of many, many, many parts of the industry. This is just a roadmap on how we need to arrive at that intimacy and that connection with the clients, perhaps in a way that is slightly different, slightly unusual.
Yeah, that's so insightful, and just changing how the imagery around maybe having more women and more just around the financial industry in general. That's a really good point. Well, thank you, Gunjan. Thank you so much for this insightful, for sharing your expertise with our Temple Milwaukee members, our emerging women leaders, and our guests. Thank you again to US Bank for serving as our anniversary sponsor for our 15th annual leadership event. Anything additional we did not cover that you would like to cover?
Well, in closing, the only thing I would say is thank you. Thank you to Tempo for orchestrating important conversations, but even more important, thank you to all your audience. If this is a time when there's a lot of distractions, it would be easy to bail from the conversation. And I sincerely appreciate sort of your members' commitment to engaging and to making a difference. It's our privilege to be part of this.
Thank you so much. Privilege to us as well. Thank you.
Thank you.